Mi hija ne hinkam ne tuanya ne tina ko mikrabet na ha tongve koi mixkanakan koi yo eme awish kone ha ekwa abo mane te hovet tamet. Hello, my relatives. I am Tina Orduno Calderon, Gabrielino Tongva, Ventureño Chumash, and Eme, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. I thank you for asking me to do a land acknowledgement. So I'll start by acknowledging the Tarahatam, the original peoples, past, present, and emerging of Tobangar, which is today called Los Angeles County, parts of Orange County, parts of San Bernardino County, as well as the 4 Southern Channel Islands. And I also acknowledge all of the ancestors across Turtle Island. I'm so grateful for the teachings that we all have in living in reciprocity with the nature, with the lands, the waters, the minerals, the animal and plant relatives across our huge territories here in Turtle Island. And I like to always remind people just to walk gently upon our Earth Mother, to give her the love and respect that she deserves. And I'm going to offer a ancestor song, and this will be in the Tonga language. Te hovet tamer honuk vetam, 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 tu me komi ketai me pai me, 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 te hovet tamer honuk vetam, 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 tu me komi ketai me pai me, 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 te hovet tamer honuk vetam. That song just greets our ancestors from all 4 directions, and I wish you blessings. And again, thank you for this opportunity. I wish koneha.
Hello, I'm Catherine O'Riordan, ESA Executive Director. Welcome to ESA's 106th annual meeting. I'm speaking to you from the ESA headquarters in Washington, D.C. on the ancestral lands of the Anacostan people. Vital Connections in Ecology is our meeting theme, and I hope you will use this virtual platform to interact with each other and celebrate our science. We want to foster an atmosphere of inclusion and respect among all attendees, staff, and volunteers. Therefore, as is the case with all ESA events, we will be enforcing the ESA Code of Conduct at this meeting, so please take a minute to review it on the platform. Thank you to all of our sponsors, especially our gold and silver level sponsors. Make sure to check out the sponsor wall on the platform to connect with them. To formally kick off the meeting, it is my great pleasure to introduce ESA's 2020-2021 President, Kathleen Weathers. She is a senior scientist and the G. Evelyn Hutchinson Chair in Ecology at the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies in Millbrook, New York. Dr. Weathers' ecosystem research is broadly interdisciplinary and cross-system, from fog to forest to cyanobacteria to team science dynamics. She spent 10 years creating, shaping, and leading the grassroots Global Lake Ecological Observatory Network, GLEON. Dr. Weathers has also served in numerous professional service roles, including as program officer at NSF, chair of the National Atmospheric Deposition Program, and a member of the ESA Public Affairs Committee. She was elected as an ESA Fellow in 2015 and received the Eugene P. Odom Award for Excellence in Ecology and Education in 2017. President Weathers will now give a few remarks and also present the ESA Regional Policy Award before introducing our plenary speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I am recording from Millbrook, New York, which is located on the ancestral lands of the Mohican and Wappinger people, lands from which they were displaced. And I would like to acknowledge the Wappinger and Mohican people past, present, and future, and honor their ongoing and fundamental relationships with the land. And I invite you, wherever you are this week, to consider a land acknowledgement. I'd like to reflect very briefly this morning on 3 ways in which ESA is moving forward in this remarkable time, moving forward in a very positive way. But before I do that, I'd like to acknowledge the engine that drives ESA and all of its activities, and that is, it's a 2-part engine, if you will. It's the volunteers, hundreds of volunteers, over 500 volunteers who are involved in all aspects of what it is that we do at ESA. And that's in concert with a professional staff of 30 led by Kathleen O'Riordan. So thank you to all of the volunteers at ESA who make up the engine. I'd like to give special thanks to my colleagues on the ESA governing board team from this year. You'll see their names here and their ecosystems of focus or interest. They have gone above and beyond their duties this year to help ESA navigate the challenging waters. So we really were in a position of leading ESA forward in a time of profound change, as you all know, and as you all experienced. And it really required dynamic planning and strategic action, fast thinking. And some of the strategic action that we were able to take this year is considered, I think, historic. So there was a public affairs post that talked about our May meeting where the ESA governing board had approved major initiatives. And those initiatives included acting on recommendations from the DEIJ task force, who made some recommendations about where we could spend resources to break down barriers, to enhance participation in all of our activities at ESA. So we approved those, and you should look forward to hearing more about some of those opportunities. The second and very important is the passing of the ESA bylaw changes, which ultimately result in more opportunities for ESA members to have leadership experiences, to roll up their sleeves and help guide ESA forward through new activities and new leadership within council. And the third is some newly burgeoning opportunities in the public affairs realm. We are bringing ecology and ecologists to the table in ways that have not happened over the past few years, and we have many opportunities that we're working on and look forward to in the future. So stay tuned for that. So in welcoming you to this meeting and for engaging with ecological science, ecological knowledge, and most importantly, making new collaborations and going away with new ideas, just send you forward with leading forward with a tip to an editorial that the 4 presidents put together to challenge, to offer opportunities to us as we go forth. And we're suggesting that it's a time to step up like never before, bring new ecologists, new ecology, new lenses to the table and get involved, bring ecology forward. Thank you and have a great meeting. It is my honor and pleasure to present the ESA 14th Annual Regional Policy Award to California's Natural Resources Secretary, Wade Crowfoot. The ESA Annual Award recognizes an elected or appointed local policymaker whose record reflects the use of ecological science to inform policy decisions. The California Natural Resources Agency, led by Secretary Crowfoot, oversees and supports more than 26 district departments, conservancies, and commissions with over 19,000 Californians to steward California's natural environment. This includes the state's forests and natural lands, rivers and waterways, coast and ocean, fish and wildlife, and energy development. As a member of the governor's cabinet, he advises the governor on natural resources and environmental issues. Secretary Crowfoot's key priorities include building California's resilience to climate change-driven threats, expanding access to parks, natural places, and outdoor recreation for all Californians, as well as preserving California's world-renowned biodiversity of plants and animals. Secretary Crowfoot, we applaud your commitment to using science in creating nature-based solutions for building water and climate resilience across California. Congratulations.
Thanks so much. It is a tremendous honor to receive this recognition from the Society. When I think about the work we do to protect the planet and protect the environment, it's really science and ecologists who are leading the way with the solutions. And so I'm just really gratified to be acknowledged. You know, in California and across the world, we face unprecedented challenges. This summer, record-breaking temperatures, catastrophic wildfire risks, and now a worsening drought, the second major drought in a decade. This incredible richness of plants and animals we have in California, our biodiversity is threatened with some of our most imperiled fish in danger given this drought. And we recognize in California that all California citizens can't equally access the outdoors and nature. So while these challenges are daunting, I'm really optimistic given just these incredible opportunities we have. California, under our governor, Gavin Newsom, and our legislature are world leaders on climate action, not only reducing carbon pollution, but protecting our communities and natural places from climate impacts. Our governor has established a 30 by 30 goal to conserve 30% of our 100 million plus acres across the state by 2030, in parallel with President Biden and our federal agencies. And we are making unprecedented investments in expanding equity of access to nature and outdoors. In all of this work, science is our foundation. And we've worked to speak truth to power during the Trump administration to make it very clear that our protection of the environment, the management of our natural resources will be guided by the science and complemented by tribal practices that have stewarded our natural environments since time immemorial, that are focused on building our climate resilience, protecting our biodiversity, and expanding equitable access. At the end of the day, I think we all do this work for intensely personal reasons. My reason is my wife and of course my daughter, who turned 7 last week. I want her to live in a world and certainly live in a state where nature is elevated, where the biodiversity that we enjoy is maintained well into her adult life and for future generations, and nature and the human community can continue to thrive. So that is my commitment in the work that I do and the work that we do at our Natural Resources Agency here in California and across California state government. Thanks if you live and work in California for all that you do, wherever you are in the country and the world, for the work that you do conserving our natural environment. And here's to our continued progress in the face of daunting challenges. We can prevail on some of these global existential threats. And I look forward to our progress together in coming years. Thanks once again for this tremendous recognition.
Now, we turn our attention to the opening plenary speaker. It is with pleasure that I introduce Brenda Mallory, who is the 12th chair of the Council on Environmental Quality, the CEQ, for President Joe Biden. She's the first African-American to serve in this position. As chair, she advises the president on environmental and natural resource policies that improve, preserve, and protect public health and the environment for America's communities. She is focused particularly on addressing the environmental justice and climate change challenges the nation faces, while also advancing opportunities for job growth and economic development. Chair Mallory has a distinguished career in federal service. She was at the Environmental Protection Agency as former Chief Operating Officer, for the Office of General Counsel, and also as CEQ General Counsel for President Obama. Now, having returned to CEQ, Chair Mallory seeks to reinvigorate CEQ's important environmental policy role. She is dedicated to ensuring that the voices of low-income and people of color are heard as the federal government tackles the environmental and public health crises our nation faces. Directly after the chair's remarks, we will move into a live Q&A session moderated by Tim Mail, former CEQ Assistant Director of Conservation for President Obama, current Executive Director at Environmental Policy Innovation Center, and member of the ESA Public Affairs Committee. Thank you, Chair Mallory, for spending time today to engage with ecologists.
Good afternoon from the White House, located on the ancestral territory of the Piscataway people. Thank you for inviting me to the 107th Ecological Society of America's annual meeting. The theme of this year's meeting resonates with me deeply because I am often reminded in my job that everything is intricately connected. Our health, our environment, our society, and our future. And speaking of connections, I cannot wait until these meetings are once again occurring in person. Before I get started, I want to congratulate Secretary Crowfoot on his well-deserved award. One of the privileges of my job is getting to partner with state and local leaders, and I look forward to working with Secretary Crowfoot. I recently celebrated my 100th day as the chair of the Council on Environmental Quality. And we also just passed 6 months since President Biden's inauguration. What a whirlwind it has been, with many on-the-ground improvements in people's lives. From catalyzing the delivery of more than 335 million vaccines, to getting people and businesses real relief with the American Rescue Plan, to resurrecting our global leadership role in the fight against climate change. I am tremendously honored to work in an administration that is prioritizing climate action, environmental protection, and environmental justice. To carry out the president's ambitious agenda across all policy areas, the Biden-Harris administration has committed to listen to the science. During President Biden's first days in office, he issued executive orders committing us to restoring the role of science in order to protect public health and the environment, conserve special places on land and in water, and tackle the climate crisis. In May, President Biden announced the America the Beautiful initiative, a locally led, nationally scaled effort to conserve and restore at least 30% of our nation's lands and waters by 2030. President Biden's decision to set a national conservation goal for the next decade is historic, and his call to action is urgently needed. We are witnessing staggering declines in wildlife populations. Habitat is being fragmented into smaller and smaller parcels. For many years now, changes in land and sea use, overexploitation, pollution, and invasive species have been among the principal drivers of the biodiversity crisis. And now, climate change is continuing to compound the impacts from these drivers, further reshaping our lands, our ocean, our coast, and our own communities. These impacts are not far away or intangible. They are here today, real and meaningful for the integrity of our lives, our livelihoods, and the ecological systems themselves. I hesitate to even use this statistic because you can't fully capture the intrinsic value of that nature provides. But on our current path, the Intergovernmental Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services believes we'll lose 10% of our global gross domestic product from loss of nature in the coming decades. This isn't just about our livelihoods, it's also about protecting the most basic element of life. Over half of the world's oxygen is produced from diatoms in the ocean. Diatoms depend on the ecosystem function, which is swiftly being undercut. The Amazon, euphemistically called the lungs of our planet, is now reported to emit more CO2 than it sequesters. As it changes from a rainforest to a savanna, that will cause global rain patterns to shift, meaning farmers in Iowa will have less water for their crops and thereby undermining the breadbasket of the world. Together, these issues pose grave risk to the abundance, resilience, and accessibility of the natural resources that are at the foundation of our lives and livelihoods. Today, it's as clear as ever that everything is interconnected. Our rainforests, our oceans, our economy, and the health and well-being of our communities. It is also clear that we have a duty to act to protect these ecosystems and places that are essential to healthy communities. We must have functioning ecosystems that can sustain us now and for generations to come. Many uses of our lands and waters can be consistent with the long-term health and sustainability of natural systems if they are managed and conducted thoughtfully and an explicit focus on protecting the integrity of resources. In order to do that, though, we need a collective, all-hands-on-deck national effort to conserve and restore the lands and waters upon which we all depend. That is what the America the Beautiful campaign is and what President Biden's vision calls for. We identified 8 key principles for achieving the president's vision. One is to use science as a guide, a principle that I know is very important to all of you. We know conservation efforts are more successful and effective when grounded in the best available science and informed by the recommendations of our top scientists and subject matter experts. Working with the best available science can help increase transparency in decision-making process and build trust among stakeholders and the public. We also know that we must not ignore indigenous and traditional ecological knowledge. Instead, we ought to recognize that it can complement our use of science in guiding land and water conservation efforts. Other equally important principles in America the Beautiful include ensuring collaborative and inclusive engagement of all stakeholders, recognizing benefits for all people, supporting locally led efforts, honoring tribal sovereignty, creating jobs and supporting healthy communities, recognizing private property rights and supporting voluntary stewardship efforts, and using tools and strategies we already have access to in order to achieve conservation goals and support innovation and adaptive management. As I mentioned, we've been busy in the first 6 months of this administration. We have established an interagency working group to guide the development and implementation of the America the Beautiful initiative. The working group, which I am excited to chair, will coordinate across federal agencies and bureaus to ensure that all interest and input are heard and incorporated into our national 2030 conservation vision. Committees will branch off of the working group to delve into particular subtopics. One of these subtopics will be focused on the development of the American Conservation and Stewardship Atlas. There's a business maxim, you can't manage what you can't measure. That also resonates with ecologists. An essential aspect of this initiative is to develop this atlas depicting the spatial extent of various conservation measures. We want it to be an accessible, current, and comprehensive way to understand conservation, stewardship, and restoration efforts across the country. The atlas will incorporate input from the public, states, tribes, scientists, and a wide range of stakeholders, and the cross-current of federal agencies that manage our lands and waters. We will build on existing federal databases, work to coordinate information across these information sources, and supplement with information from states and tribes and other partners. The Atlas will help us know where we are and also help us have a transparent, open dialogue about where we are headed. Having a clear vision of where we are headed could not be more important. After more than a year of pandemic, in which many Americans, myself included, have found comfort and peace in the outdoors, the President's vision is offering us a much-needed chance to summon our nation's shared love for our common home, do more to safeguard the places we love, and leave our country better, stronger, and healthier for generations to come. When reflecting the best version of ourselves, we are a nation that believes every child should have the chance to experience the wonders of nature. Importantly, as demonstrated by the principles in the report, this initiative is one that puts equity and access at the center. Too often, our lands and waters have also been places of inequitable access and injustice. We also recognize that people and the environment are inextricably connected. Because of this, the President has directed the establishment of a civilian conservation corps. The Industrial Revolution brought about transformative economic change, but it also brought about destructive changes in the climate system. The Civilian Conservation Corps is intended to jumpstart the economy of the future, where the way we work makes the air and the water cleaner rather than dirtier. These will be good, green jobs, building the technological advances to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy, constructing living shores to keep people safe from floodwater while also providing habitat for fish and wildlife, and developing and implementing resilience plans for communities. To implement President Biden's vision, we are going to think broadly and inclusively about conservation in order to build an enduring ethic to improve the quality of all Americans' lives, now and for decades to come. One thing we know is that this initiative will only be successful if we actively engage local, state, and tribal governments, community members, and a range of other stakeholders, including scientific experts such as all of you. So this is my ask of you. Stay engaged. Continue to offer feedback and guidance as we work to incorporate ecological factors into the overall conversation. Continue to offer feedback as we drive this policy with inclusion, equity, and access at its center. We believe the best science will emerge from the representative environments, and we will rely on experts like you every step of the way. I am eager to roll up my sleeves and get to work alongside of many of you. So thank you for the work that you do every single day, and thank you for inviting me to join you today. I'm happy to answer a few questions now.
Chair Mallory, it's great to be here with you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us, joining the Ecological Society of America. And of course, it's always great to be with you as another fellow conservationist who grew up in the great little tiny state of Connecticut.
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be here as well. It's a pleasure to actually be able to participate in this program.
So let me start with a question about sort of where you started, which is about America the Beautiful. And I guess the bigger context for this question is around how sound ecological science can be used in the conservation and climate mitigation and adaptation actions the administration is considering. So that's the sort of broader question. More specifically, how do ecologists get engaged in President Biden's America the Beautiful initiative?
Well, thank you for that. And I mean, I hope you could tell from my remarks, I think we're very excited about what the America the Beautiful initiative will allow. And the opportunity to basically be able to work with broad stakeholders across the country on this effort, recognizing that from region to region, there are very robust conservation efforts that are already occurring, and just having the opportunity to lift those up, but then to build upon those. And so I think importantly, we see ecologists and others across the country as being able to bring their expertise to the development, helping to identify what are the best opportunities for actually doing projects that will have a positive impact on our efforts to deal with the biodiversity crisis. What's the kind of work that you're seeing from the analysis and studies that are going on that should be important as part of our consideration of the projects that we want to lift up and that we want to help advance? And I think those are ways in which ecologists can sort of come to the table and help us from region to region and project to project to really understand how we get the greatest value out of this effort. I think one of the things that we know, and the effort is, or the initiative is designed to emphasize, is just that there's so much work that is going on in this area that is under the radar. And so we want to actually sort of take advantage of the things that are under the radar that really have a huge impact just by the collaboration with the entities at the local and the state level. And so I think that's one of our key focuses in how we make this work.
Thanks for that. How will this administration ensure that environmental and natural resource agencies can leverage modern data technology? So whether that's new, satellite tools or radio transmitters that fit in the back of, hummingbirds, or all sorts of, artificial intelligence, machine learning based tools. How can the administration and how can the Ecological Society's members help bring that technology to bear for your existing programs and then for new initiatives that the administration is working on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually such a great point, Tim, because, one of the things that President Biden, I think, showed from day one is that he and this administration more broadly really is taking seriously science in general, science and technology, science integrity, science leadership. I think the series of executive orders that were issued early on sort of show the focus on that. But a recognition that we are able to do things today that, in some ways are unimaginable because of the advances that have already occurred. And a simple example that I know I just heard people talking about recently in a briefing was just how our ability to identify wildfires has increased so much because some of the technology that allows us to be alert to where there are areas of fire that have already started much earlier than you would have gotten a report because of sensors, because of video technology. And so I think in some ways the success that we've seen in the mission from the integration of technological tools is going to end up being the motivation for really giving greater credence to ideas and things that the public can and members like those in ESA can bring to the government's attention. I think we know that we can be helped by folks with the expertise that your members have.
Great, thanks. And I'll just comment that I happen to be out in Colorado, and there was a wildfire from a lightning strike that happened outside Aspen. My son saw it out the car window. And pretty small fire. And he looked on USDA's incident map, and it had already shown up on the map. So just a couple hours after it occurred, to your point. The technology is just amazing. Pivoting to the international stage, where there's sort of so much opportunity. What are this administration's efforts going to look like to restore and elevate the U.S. position and leadership on international conservation efforts, and both on the climate side, but also international biodiversity work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that even though the United States has not been a member of the Treaty on Biodiversity, we've always been a player and have, continued to be a player even over the last few years. And I think that's important because this administration is sort of lifting that up and recognizing that there is an opportunity here to examine all of our goals, but in particular, when you look at the climate goals, it's going to be important that there is a international perspective on that, because that is going to be essential, I think, for the success that we are envisioning. And so the Department of State is already kind of working in identifying efforts and collaboration that will be important for the upcoming meetings that are happening that are focused on biodiversity. And I think that the CEQ and other members of the administration are sort of playing a role in identifying how to take advantage of that opportunity.
Great, thank you. And I noticed, I'm really excited that the Senate is making fast progress on an infrastructure bill. From your and my time together, and since, there's been an awful lot of infrastructure weeks that have happened without much action. So this just seems like a really, really exciting moment. And I'm so thrilled with President Biden and the administration's efforts and the Senate's efforts on this bipartisan package. And I bring that up because so much infrastructure has a permitting component. And of course, CEQ is in the middle of a lot of permitting, at least with regard to the National Environmental Policy Act and environmental impact statements, environmental analysis. In June, you took action in the Federal Register to give agencies more time to implement, to issue agency-specific implementation guidance on rules that came out in the last administration. Also, in that notice, expressed quite a bit of skepticism about some of the components of the last administration's actions in NEPA regulations. And I guess the sort of questions here are really interested in having you talk just sort of more broadly about NEPA, but do you expect to withdraw some of the changes made in those regulations from the Trump administration? Specifically, sort of restoring the scope and application of a previous guidance around climate change. And I guess I'm just curious as well if there's anything that you and CEQ expect to do that might bring sort of new approaches around climate into impact analysis or alternatives development.
Yeah, so thanks, Tim. Obviously, that's front and center in the work that we're doing at CEQ. And you made reference to the first action that we've taken on the interim final guidance relating to the agency's implementation of a directive in the 2020 rule to put in place rules that were consistent with the 2020 rule. But in addition, in May, in the Unified Regulatory Agenda, it identified CEQ's thought on how it wanted to proceed on the review that it's taking on the 2020 regulations, which is in a phased approach. And so we're expecting, and I think it's still true, that we're expecting that we will move forward first with a targeted or strategic rulemaking, identifying the issues that we have heard the most about from the federal agencies and stakeholders that are creating confusion, that are creating some concerns about what the impact will be on environmental analysis, and then proceed with a phase 2 rule that would be a broader rule that might look more, that look beyond the strategic focus, but also think about how environmental review in this era ought to work and can work. So I think we're moving forward, as expeditiously as possible. You know how hard that can be within the federal government, but I think we're putting a lot of our focus and energy on addressing the issues. And again, as you said, I think we've been pretty clear that we have some concerns that that things need to be addressed in the rules, and so we're working to look at those, and expect to have some public process in the fall that all folks will participate in, including, I hope, your members who can speak to the ways in which a proposal would advance scientific interest.
Great, thanks so much. Going back to something else you brought up in your earlier remarks, can you talk a little bit more about the administration's efforts to address and advance equity and environmental justice across the federal government, and a little bit specifically about CEQ's role in that as well? Absolutely,
and again, this is another area in which, beginning at during the campaign and then during the very early days of the administration, the president has been very clear about the importance of equity within the agenda. And CEQ in particular has been given several responsibilities to drive the integration of environmental justice across the federal government through two frameworks in particular that were established by the early executive orders. One, the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, and the other, the White House Environmental Justice Interagency Group. And that interagency group in particular, which I chair, is a mechanism to make sure that we are coordinating across the government and how we ensure that equity is being reflected in the work that we're doing. So just several weeks ago, we issued a guidance document that is designed to integrate one of the key components of this work into the federal government's process. And it's called the Justice 40 initiative. And the interim guidance that we issued is how do you implement the Justice 40 initiative? And that initiative was a commitment that the president made to ensure that 40% of the overall benefits from climate regulatory action, from energy efficiency work, and from other investments that the federal government is making go to the disadvantaged communities who are often disinvested in when this kind of work is done. And so what we introduced or submitted several weeks ago on the guidance is basically how to make that program work across the government. And there are three key components to it. One, the guidance identifies the specific areas of the federal government's programs that we are covering, and how we expect the agencies to look at the various programs within certain categories. It established pilot projects for 21 specific programs that, in coordination with our Environmental Justice Advisory Committee, as well as other advocates, had been identified as places in which there's often a very direct connection to federal funding. And then third, the guidance puts in place mechanisms for, keeping ourselves accountable and making sure that we're following through. And the point of those pilot projects is really a recognition of, how difficult the task is to try to overlay this type of commitments on a huge federal infrastructure, and I don't want to use infrastructure loosely, but the federal system. And this will allow us to get started, to have some immediate benefits based on existing resources, but also to see what are the challenges that are presented when you try to integrate this into our programs, and so that we can learn from that and then use that as a basis for applying the lessons learned to our broader programs. So I think it's a really important first stage. We recognize it as a first stage because I think that this is going to have to be an iterative process as we go forward, working with our stakeholders, working with the federal agencies, just to make sure that we get this right. But we've never done anything like this in the federal government, and so I think it's important that we're doing this now.
Yeah, thanks for that. And just a comment that being quite familiar with the work of OMB in tracking the effectiveness of government programs, and just how every administration has made that a priority, but tried to do it in a different way, tried to learn from what's happened in the past. to me, Justice 40 seems like the first step, as you said, but one that reflects a real intentionality about understanding the effects and then, trying to figure out iteratively, how do we keep getting better and better at that kind of analysis? And, the Ecological Society is full of people who love to do accounting, ecological accounting. And so I think it's probably pretty appealing to membership here as well that the administration is taking this on.
Oh, I hope so. I hope that's right. And we welcome hearing from you if that's true.
Great. Let me ask about water issues just a little bit. PFAS contamination. I know that's a big priority. The president's spoken about it, and I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about CEQ's role there, and how addressing PFAS and or water contamination issues more broadly fits into the administration's agenda.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, the president has spoken directly about it. There's funding that is focused on PFAS, both in the 2022 proposed budget, as well as in the infrastructure package. There's a quite substantial amount of money that would be directed towards trying to tackle the PFAS problem. PFAS in some ways is a perfect example of the kind of work that CEQ has been known for doing, because there are so many parts of the government that have a role in addressing PFAS, from the science agencies to the metrics agencies, to the agencies like DOD that have some role in some of the contamination that has occurred. And I think our goal is to try to pull those various agencies and the work that they're doing. And I will say, I think they are all doing work right now, but how to get that aligned in a way and moving in a direction that will result in some positive benefits for people on the ground. I met a couple of weeks ago with a collection or coalition of advocates from around the country who have been significantly impacted by PFAS contamination in their communities, talking about the kind of impacts that they're suffering, the kind of impacts that their families are suffering, and really a cry for some action by the federal government to try to take on this issue. And so, yeah, CEQ is stepping in and trying to figure out what is the role that we can play to actually help advance this issue in a positive direction. And it's one that I think is going to be one of our more important contributions to the administration over our next 4 years for sure.
Thanks, Brenda. And just I think we have time for one more question. What role do tribes and traditional knowledge play in advancing sustainable and equitable environmental outcomes?
Yeah, I think, again, that's an area in which the administration has placed a lot of emphasis on, again, from the beginning, recognizing that we as a country have not always had the best, most productive relationships with tribes, or even acknowledged the value from traditional ecological knowledge that is brought by these communities. And in the America the Beautiful initiative itself, we specifically talk about the importance of collaborating with tribes, sort of recognizing what tribes bring to the table in terms of an understanding of the landscape and areas in particular places. And there are many examples of where the experience and the knowledge that the tribes have had in an area has been important to the federal government in addressing issues. I think Exxon Valdez is one in which is noted, where the Alaskan natives there were very helpful in helping the federal government to understand what the harms were from the impact of the oil spill in that period. But there are many ways in which that knowledge and that understanding of the landscape and of the species and of the number of animals in a herd or that are used to a certain area is valuable. And I think we're looking for ways to make sure that gets integrated into the work that we do.
Thank you so much for your time this morning and for the administration's work so far on all these exciting initiatives.
Thanks, Tim. And thank you to the rest of the members of ESA. Appreciate being here.